everyone. Hi, Sylvia.
Hey.
Hi,
Hello.
Kofi. And hi,
Hey.
everyone. Welcome back to another season of Bookish Casual Book Club. I'm Laura, and I'm here with my friends Sylvia and Kofi. Um, did you guys have good summer?
I did. I
I
I, I
did too.
accomplished two out of the three books that I plan to have read. Only two out of the
All
three.
right. Well,
All right, so
that's what
I
we're
guess we're
here to
starting this
discuss
now,
today.
huh? All right, let's go for
So,
it.
yeah, Kofi, you go. You go. Tell us how your reading plan went over the summer.
Well, it was touch and go there. I started with uh, this book, How to Survive in a Science Fiction Universe by Charles Yu. Let me make certain I get it on the screen. And then I had Tom Lynn's A Thousand Crimes of Ming Su. I read Charles Yu's book and then I listened to Tom Lynn's book, which was a fascinating way of reading and thinking and listening all at the same time. And I found that the reader, and I can't remember his name, his affectation of a Westerner was really good and engaging. And I actually found myself enjoying listening to his reading of the books of the book as opposed to my reading of Charles Yu's book, when it was just the voice that I was fictitiously creating in my head, and there was the one that was created by this reader about this uh, outlaw, I guess, traveling to find his woman, as most outlaws are wont to do. And so it was very interesting. It was a bit of magical realism in there. And I think that it's a wonderful book to read as well as listen to, because at certain points I did read along. Um, Probably by part two, I was reading along with the voice, so I felt kind of like a school child listening to the teacher read as I followed along with my eyes. Um, and but the Charles Yu book was really really good. The other book that I wanted to read was A Dream Deferred, and it was something about the cosmic something or another. I know it has to do with quantum mechanics. It's written by this woman whose name escapes me, and I'll have it probably by the time you guys start talking. Um, but I didn't get a chance to read hers, and I think I started off by saying I'm gonna read hers first, and I did not. I read fiction first, and so hers did not get read. So yeah, two out of three is not bad. It's better than my last
That's
fail
great.
when it was pretty much all
That's
bad.
great.
I'd say that's a win. Yeah, I had a great summer. Did some traveling, and yeah, so I had a few. I'll call them goals, summer reading goals, and for our listeners who've been listening to us for more than one season, you'll know that every summer we kind of end the season with our summer reading goals outlined, and then like a summer reading challenge, and then we'll begin our season to kind of check in to see how we did. And the last 2 years, it's been a pretty hard fail. Let's be honest. We have not done well, but that's okay because we're normalizing what it's like to not finish a book. So I mean, it's okay. The world will go on spinning, but not for long. So for me, I had a big book that I wanted to try and finish, and that was Fanon's The Love Song of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I had all of these grand plans to listen to the book. I was like, you know what? I'm going to be stuck on like a 14-hour long haul flight. I can finish this book. Sure, why not? That did not exactly happen the way I imagined. I remember how much I was flying, and flying with two small children, and the need to sleep, I guess, prevailed. So I did not actually make it through that one, but I did make it through my other book, which is actually also our Bowder Lecture book for this year. Don't mind the little piggy bookmark. And it's Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu. And it was a really interesting book. It was very poetic. It's not structured like your usual prose memoirs are. So it was a really interesting and a really thought-provoking book. She experiments a lot with form and the form that you use to tell your story with, in addition to the language, which is very poetic in nature. So yeah, I mean, I didn't completely fail, but yeah, I did some reading, and then I had some other random books that weren't even on my summer list, and I don't know if I can count those. How about you, Laura?
Well, I am so excited to report that I did finish the big book. So like Sylvia, I had committed to read the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And it is 800 pages long. And, I studied 18th century British novels in graduate school. So I know some long novels, and it's been a long time though, since I read such a big book. But I did finish it, and this sense of accomplishment is amazing. So now I'm emboldened, and several people have told me about I think it's called The Covenant of Water. Yes, by Abraham Verghese. And a couple people have said that it's the best book they have ever read. And it is also 700-800 pages long. So now I am, I know I can do it. So I think I might take that on next. Although reading during the semester is a little bit challenging. But I did want to say this about the book. When I told people that I was reading Fanon Jeffers' book, everyone said it was so long. It could have been, X hundred number of pages shorter. But after reading it, I realized I think that the book needed to be that long because the thing that the book is trying to tell you is how long this history is, but also how intimately connected we are through the generations, and the how things like trauma is passed down generation to generation, right? And so she's showing both the longevity, but also the closeness, I guess, by telling this one family's story over the generations. So in some ways, I can see why it had to be so long, and it did the job. So, and I also add, I felt like the book was also very much about how to do history or how to study history. That's also another interesting aspect of reading the novels. I recommend it. Those of you who are brave can pick up the book. I did finish that other book, Paper Names. Remember the book that my son got for me for Mother's Day? It was all right. I finished it. It was all right. And I think the third book on my list. But the third book that was on my list was Marilyn Chin's new poetry collection, and I'm still reading through that, so not quite finished, but I think I did all right this summer.
I think you win the game ball, and there's going to be one for you because I got one for you. And I had to go and put it in the chat to remember the actual name of the third book that I failed at reading. It's called The Disordered Cosmos, A Journey in Dark Matter, Space, Time, and Dreams Deferred by Chandra Prescott Weinstein. So I just wanted to shout her out. It's not that I hated your book. It's just I started doing a lot of other reading that was more job related, and within my area of composition. And then unfortunately that Tom Lin book had me going. It's a great read. You can read it without listening to it, especially if you've never read a Chinese American Western. It is definitely something different. It is unique in its delivery, its pace and tone. It's definitely not the love songs of W.H.B. W.E.B. Du Bois, but or the love song of Alfred Prufrock. But it is definitely a book that takes you on this journey, and there are some surprises, and I don't want to ruin it, but there's a kind of carnival-esqueness about it that you might find engaging and entertaining. But it is a Western, so expect gunfights and some gratuitous violence, but not too over the top violence. But it's good. It's a really good book.
That sounds like fun, and I can confidently say I have never read a Chinese Western, so that's something that I might be interested in picking out later. Thanks for the rec.
Yeah, and it's within a specific historical time period. Of course, Westerns are timely. And so, dealing with the railroad, and if you know the history of the railroad and how it was, especially across the United States, some of that history is there, and it's meaningful but not overly sentimentalized or even overly politicized. I would say it's just a matter of history and a matter of fact. Just like the settling of the West, it was violent, and but you don't necessarily think about Chinese Americans being Westerners, and that's the thing that's kind of necessary. I mean, it seems like it shouldn't be surprising, but it is in a way.
I was going to ask if you think you're going to get back to the Disordered Cosmos at some point and actually read it, or go back to that.
Yeah, I will. When, I don't know. but I want to, because I'm reading. I also have Stephen, it might be Stephen Alexander's book about the universe, and he calls it something like the jazz of the universe. So I'm trying to read some of those things in terms of what I'm putting together in terms of fiction. So that's my reason for reading them. But am I in a big hurry? I can't say I am. Got all these student papers to read.
I just realized that in the three of our kind of books, there is a sort of a running theme of history, whether it is, actual like history, like you're talking about, like the history of the West, or, Laura, what you're talking about, how history can reverberate through generations and family history. I think, and for the memoir that I read, which is called Aftershocks, literally, kind of making this comparison between the aftershocks of an earthquake, which for the writer for Owusu, the aftershocks are coming from this pretty, for her, a deep revelation, a secret from her family that she wasn't aware of, and so that what's kind of left in the rubble, I suppose, of this earthquake level revelation for her and her family. And I think that's interesting that all three of our summer reading brought us through, I would say, histories. And the memoir also kind of weaves in a little bit of history, and I won't give away too much because a lot is centered around this like sort of family thing that's happened. But that kind of revelation is tied into the history of the country that the author is growing up in. So or grew up in. So I think it's really interesting that we inadvertently got drawn into these sort of historical threads, and that history led us to very different places over the summer, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, I mean, it's funny because like the energy I'm getting from our summer reading, and it's not that these books were not wonderful books. The energy I'm getting though is that we're kind of like, yeah, I mean, it was good, but like I feel like we've had books before where we're like, oh my gosh, this book made me really excited to read something else, I guess. And I thought that's curious. Do you guys find that any of the books that you read like really ignited on something? Like Laura, it sounds like your desire now to take on the Covenant of Water is coming from this sort of feeling of accomplishment of having read the book, but not maybe necessarily the book itself. The thing is, for my book, Nadia Owusu is a gorgeous writer. I mean, her writing is lovely. So it's not that the writing is not wonderful. The caliber of writing is quite high. Honorée Fanonne-Jeffers is also well known for her skill at writing. Charles Yu, we've read his stuff, a huge fan of his style. But I don't know. I feel like maybe the energy feels subdued. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I haven't had my afternoon coffee.
I feel subdued only in that, like, because I read this 800-page book, I'm like done. Meaning like I'm off the hook like for the rest of the year or something. Like, hey, I already did I front loaded my reading in the summer. But I was saying I actually do want to take on the Covenant of Water because I know now I can read a long book. And I think like the last time I read a book like that was The Historian. I forget her last name. There's a vampire story, vampire novel. And since then, I really enjoy short little books, like just start it, finish it, right? And it gives me a sense of accomplishment. But I'm thinking maybe I do enjoy the longer works. It's a very different reading experience. And to be honest, I read most of it or more than half of this book at the beach, and it was one of the worst beach vacations ever. And the only saving grace, so many things went wrong. Like everybody got sick, nobody slept. Things were horrible. Only saving grace was that I had time to finish this book. So it's especially special for me, this book, because it saved me from a complete disaster of a vacation. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that if there is a level of being subdued, it is because I was reading really three different types of books. I didn't have a good way of situating them. So I went with Tom Lynn's because it was such a unique type of book that I hadn't experienced. And because I've read Charles Yu's work before, and I know he dabbles in speculative fiction, I kind of had a sense of that, and so I knew what I was reading. And even though he has elements of family history and family trauma as well, it was situated within the speculative universe, right? Whereas Tom Lynn's book was, like I said, there are bits of the magical realism here and there, but it's set in a place from the upper Salt Lake City area going down through California and moving sort of more or less Midwest into Reno and whatnot. It was just a different experience hearing the voice as I was listening to the book being read, as well as reading along with the book and just really appreciating the journey of Ming-Su. And he does have 1,000 crimes. That's true.
That's a lot of fun.
So and so it was just. And then when I looked at Prescott Weinstein's book, it just didn't really fit the journey anymore. It was very different. And the jazz of physics, that's what Stefan Alexander's book's called. That too is just it just felt outside of what I was doing, and maybe had I started with the Disordered Cosmos, I might have had a different way of looking at things, but I didn't. So.
Can you distinguish for our listeners how you would how you would define speculative fiction, the unique characteristics of that versus magical realism? Because I feel like some of our listeners might be more familiar with the concept of magical realism, but I feel like speculative fiction and speculative nonfiction even are fairly, they're not new, but I feel like more people are paying attention to it these days. At least that's what I gather from like the algorithm on my advertisements. But that just,
I guess the way Neil Gaiman described it in the introduction to, I think, the maybe 30th anniversary or 40th or 50th anniversary of Fahrenheit, 451 or 457 or something like that. Raymond Bradbury's book was that, speculative fiction is really asking what would happen if, or what should happen when this occurs. And so it's in its whole entirety, it's a speculation. And so what Charles Yu is doing is making these characters survive in a science fictional universe. So he's speculating on how they would go about existing, a father, son, a mother, and an imaginary or real dog. Whereas with Tom Lin, there are parts in the book where he's a part of a carnival, and one of the people are shapeshifters, and so it's not really speculative in a sense as it is. There's some magic that's happening. There's a boy who cannot speak and cannot necessarily hear, but he can talk telepathically in everyone's head. So there's that sort of element, and there's this woman who cannot be burned. So she sets herself on fire. And so, but all of these things are symbolic of something else. Whereas I think with speculative fiction, it is positing a kind of reality that one might believe could be without really evidence of it. So I don't know if I made it worse or better for our viewers or listeners.
No, I totally agree. And I'd add, like, for me, the difference between the two really is, in like what you're talking about, the examples you gave in the Tom Lin book, you're set in the real world very much, but there are elements of, I guess, magic, I suppose, in there, things that are not normal in that real world versus all the speculative fiction I've read. You're not necessarily in the reality or the real world as we might know it, or you might be set in like a parallel dimension or parallel universe of some sort. And I kind of like how you phrase it. You're asking, like, what if, what would happen or what could happen if this. And so I think that's a really great way to describe it. And I figure, our readers might be interested in dabbling in a little bit of both. Maybe we should do a whole session on that, a whole episode. I feel like it would be fun to look at speculative works, fiction and nonfiction. Yeah. I'm really interested in speculative nonfiction as kind of almost a new, like, sort of subgenre of nonfiction that folks are experimenting in, because nonfiction, it's almost like how does that work in nonfiction? But it really talks about the reliability of memory and asks the same questions about one's own story and episodes in one's own life, I suppose. So it's kind of it's creative nonfiction, but it's so maybe that's a book type for. And I'm trying to remember the name. I was just talking about this with somebody. I can't remember the name of the author that we were talking about, but maybe that's a read for next time. So
Sounds good.
Yeah, and the book was called Bradbury's book is Fahrenheit
451.
451. I was thinking about Heinz 57 sauce.
Are you hungry, Kofi? Did you not eat at lunch?
Can I also share with you that my son, who's starting high school now, his summer reading was he had this ambitious goal. I probably had something to do with it of reading The Great Gatsby in English, and then reading it in Spanish to practice his Spanish. Funny thing was,
Okay.
he couldn't even read the one in English. I didn't realize the language in that book is just it's a little different, right, than what he might read that are written now. I don't know. And he's like, I don't even know what these words mean in English. And then after he read it, he finished the book. He really was like, no, this is not it. So he didn't read it in Spanish, obviously. So anyway, that was his summer reading. He thought The Great Gatsby was me.
Oh, wait! If he takes any English lit classes, he's going to see that book again.
I know.
But he did love Fahrenheit 451.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. All right, folks.
All right. Well, we are coming close to an end. You can also catch us at Bookish, a casual book club.podbean.com or anywhere you listen to podcasts, because we are becoming ubiquitous. We are everywhere. Spotify, Apple Music, we're going to be everywhere. So you can catch us and catch up with us. You can also, tap into us on our Facebook page. If you want to follow our readings or you have comments about the show, please do so. See you next
everyone.
time.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy reading.